Imagine stepping into a medieval city. Bustling markets, grand cathedrals, the hum of daily life. But behind the charm, a gauntlet of disease, crime and filth that could make modern urban stress seem like a holiday. So, how did people survive? How did they navigate a world where a simple cut could mean infection, where thieves lurked in dark alleys, and where the wrong word in the wrong place could land you in serious trouble? A medieval city wasn't just streets and buildings. It was a living, breathing organism, teetering constantly between prosperity and chaos. And if you wanted to thrive, or even just make it to the next day, you had to know how to survive. In the early Middle Ages, if you were an ordinary person, chances were you lived in a rural village, a religious community, or on feudal land. Why? Because that's where 90% of the population was. Life revolved around the manor, where peasants and serfs worked at the land under the watchful eye of the local lord. And if you wanted to leave, maybe strike out on your own or even just get married, you couldn't just pack up and go. You needed the lord's permission. No approval, no freedom. Now, fast forward to the 12th and 13th centuries. Something changes. Cities start to boom. Paris, London, Venice, these places aren't just growing, they're thriving. Trade is flourishing, markets are expanding, and suddenly the city is where the action is. But there's a problem. Cities need workers, and feudal lords aren't exactly eager to let their labour force walk away. Authorities come up with a deal. Move to a city, stay for a year and a day, and you're free. Just like that. No more feudal obligations. No more asking permission. Now, before you start celebrating, there's a catch. Your old lord doesn't exactly want to lose free labour. He can send a bailiff after you to drag you back. So if you're a runaway serf in the big city, you keep a low profile, stay out of trouble, and hope nobody recognises you. Imagine walking through the streets of a medieval city, say London. The air is thick with the scent of roasting meat from a nearby market stall, and the rhythmic clatter of horseshoes on cobblestone. But beneath that lively surface, there's something else. Something far less pleasant. The stench. Because in a city with thousands of people and no plumbing, where does all the waste go? Well, it goes everywhere. With no sewage systems, people simply threw waste, human and otherwise, right into the street. And when it rained, that waste mixed into a delightful sludge that ran between houses and shops, straight down to the nearest river, where people also got their drinking water. Medieval cities became the perfect breeding ground for illness. Now, let's say you were wealthy. Lucky you. You might have a private toilet, a privy, connected to a cesspit beneath your home. But these cesspits had a tendency to overflow. Authorities eventually had to hire men called gong farmers to dig out the filth and carry it outside the city. Not exactly a glamorous job. For everyone else though, waste went straight onto the streets or into chamber pots, which were then emptied, usually out of the window. So if you happened to be walking below at the wrong time, well, bad luck. And then there was the water problem. Wells and rivers were the main sources, but these were also prime locations for washing clothes, disposing of garbage, and yes, getting rid of waste. Therefore, drinking water wasn't exactly clean. People did sometimes boil it, but without germ theory, they didn't really understand why that helped. Many turned to beer and ale instead, which was often safer to drink. It also meant that for much of the day, everyone was slightly drunk. You've just arrived in the big city. Congratulations! Now, how are you going to make a living? Well, if you weren't afraid of a bit of hard work, you had plenty of options. Take blacksmiths, for example. They weren't just hammering out horseshoes, they were crafting swords, tools, and intricate metalwork that kept the city running. But swinging a hammer all day wasn't for the faint-hearted. It took years to master, and the same went for carpenters, who built everything from houses to fine furniture, and weavers whose hands turned thread into elaborate tapestries. Skilled labour like this wasn't something you picked up overnight, which is why the apprentice system was everywhere. But you couldn't just walk in and start making masterpieces. You had to find a master, sign yourself up for years of grueling work, and maybe, if you were lucky, you'd one day open your own shop. It was a medieval version of climbing the corporate ladder, except with more blisters. Now, food. Everyone needs it. But making it was no easy task. If you were a baker, you spent your days sweating over a roaring oven, ensuring the fire was just right so the bread didn't burn. Butchers? Their job wasn't just about chopping meat, it was about making sure every single part of the animal was used. Waste nothing. And if you had a weak stomach, well, this probably wasn't the trade for you. Now, let's talk about barbers. Today, you'd go to one for a haircut. But in the medieval city, they were a whole different breed. If you had a toothache, needed surgery, or wanted a little bloodletting, you went to your local barber. That's right, haircuts and medieval medicine, all under one roof. And strangely enough, people actually trusted them. Medieval cities were hubs of trade, culture, and innovation. But with thousands of people crammed together, they were also magnets for crime. Keeping order was a constant challenge, especially without a centralized police force. Pickpockets, burglars, and street gangs thrived in the narrow, twisting alleyways. But authorities weren't going to let lawlessness take over. City watchmen patrolled after dark, curfews were enforced, and punishments were designed to be as public and terrifying as possible. So, living in a medieval city had its advantages, opportunities, trade, and culture. But crime, disease, fire, and a legal system that wasn't exactly forgiving made life unpredictable. If you wanted to survive, you needed street smarts, connections, and a little bit of luck. And that, of course, is how cities evolved into the bustling, complex metropolises we know today. But that's another story.